Then in Sports Central, we go for our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Arizona Wildcats, a team that went 5-7 overall in the 2022 season. And considering the low expectations this team had going into 2022, this actually turned out to be a halfway decent season for this team. Definitely something to build on. How's this team going to be in 2023? And whether or not this team could potentially be a Pac-12 dark horse in the 2023 season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. Once again, the record was 5-7. This team started out the season 3-2, which, I mean, I didn't even do a prediction on this team last season because of how bad they were expected to be. This was a team that was very much considered to be in a messy situation heading into 2022. So all of the low expectations, I mean, this team really couldn't disappoint too much, that was for sure. But start out the season with a nice win over San Diego State. Beat them 38-20, lost to Mississippi State by a few touchdowns. That was a tough loss, but beat North Dakota State by 3. Lost to Cal on the road. They beat Colorado 43-20, a nice win there. And obviously, Colorado was just horrible last season. I mean, they were just atrocious. And then they had their 4-game losing streak. Lost to Oregon, Washington, USC, and Utah. 4 of the top teams in the Pac-12 last year. And I mean, they hung on against USC. I mean, USC was a team that last year, I mean, they were a brutal team offensively. Now, defensively, USC wasn't as good, and Arizona was able to take advantage of that. They scored 37 against USC, couldn't win it, but in the end, I mean, they hung on with USC, which definitely is impressive. They beat UCLA on the road 34-28. That was a huge win there, and also beat Arizona State to finish out the regular season 38-35. So this turned out to be a 5-win team last year, which, considering, I mean, this was a team that was expected 2 to 3 wins by most. I mean, so it really was not a bad season for this team, getting up to 5 wins, and it really shows potential for the future, especially with the returning production. I mean, this is a team that offensively really looks good. Looking forward to 2023. This could, honestly, this is a team that is very overlooked, I think, especially offensively. This offense could be excellent in 2023. You consider Jaden Delora coming back, the Washington State transfer, who last season overall really played well. He did turn over the ball quite a bit, 13 interceptions, but you consider the 3,700 yards, the 25 touchdowns, 63% completion rate, really not too bad. And you could consider it to be his best season so far. I mean, he played 2 seasons with Washington State, was the primary starter for both seasons. And I mean, he's coming around, and you consider the protection that he's going to have this season. I think Jaden Delora is really a guy to keep an eye on. Michael Wiley's coming back, who put up over 1,100 yards last season, along with 11 touchdowns. He's a guy to keep an eye on. Even the receiving core, I mean, this team had 2 receivers over 1,000 yards last year. That's definitely something that I think gets overlooked as well. You consider Dorian Singer, who had over 1,100 yards, and then Jacob Coing not far behind with 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns last season. I mean, not too many teams can have 2 or more receivers with over 1,000 yards in a season, and Arizona of all teams had 2. I mean, we see that out of Ohio State all the time, obviously, but Arizona, this is a team that's got some talent offensively for sure. Dorian Singer is gone, so that's definitely going to be one of the key losses for this offense next season, but at least you got Jacob Coing coming back, who was just as good last season, honestly, and you can expect him to be a big standout in 2023. And honestly, there's a receiving core in general has got some really good depth. You consider McMillan coming back, McLaughlin coming back as well. So, your top tight end, your third in receiving, which, I mean, Tetero at McMillan last season, over 700 yards as well. I mean, this receiving core was excellent. So, there's a lot of talent on this offense for sure. This is definitely an offense to keep an eye on. And honestly, it's no wonder that this team was able to keep up with USC last season. I mean, this was a good offense last year, and USC known for an excellent offense, not so good defense last year. I mean, for Arizona, put up 37 points in that game was not surprising. You consider the Washington game as well, putting up 39 points there. And I mean, most games this team offensively was able to stay in it. It was just the defense that really let down. And I mean, this defense is going to look a lot different. They lose 2 on the D-line, 3 linebackers, 3 in the secondary. So a lot of losses defensively, but I don't know that that's a necessarily bad thing for this team. I mean, once again, the defense was the main issue for this team last season. They were kind of similar to a team like USC last season in that fact. I mean, I don't think Arizona is near as good of an offense as USC. I mean, USC's just got so much firepower, but Arizona is a team that can get there, I think. And I mean, you consider the experience this team is going to have. I mean, that's within reason to say that this team could be a contender. It's just the defense. Can this defense play well enough to get this team into contention in the Pac-12? I mean, this team exceeded expectations last year, but could they be a dark horse in 2023 in the Pac-12? I definitely think so. But once again, it's going to heavily depend on the defense. Your transfer portal and recruiting now. Dorian Singer off to USC, speaking of which. So, I mean, that's a tough loss, losing him to USC, another Pac-12 team. But USC is, I mean, they are stacked. Offensively, they're going to be brutal. And defensively for USC this season, that's why I like them so much. If you've seen my top 25s and everything, it's because USC's defense should be better in 2023. I mean, their offense is going to be potentially even better. And you could have argued USC had the best offense in the country last season. So, I mean, that's definitely a tough loss there. I mean, he was an excellent receiver for this team last season. If you could have returned, I'll say this, a lot of players that you're losing in the transfer portal, this is a team that you could argue to be right up there as one of the top teams in the conference. But at least you got Montana Lamonius Craig coming in from Colorado. He was excellent last season. I would expect him to be a starter for this team this season. You lose Woody Jean. You also lose a couple of defensive linemen. You're bringing in a couple as well, which is good to replace the players you're losing. Justin Flo coming in from Oregon. You also bring in Oren Patu from Cal. And then you lose multiple players in the linebacking situation and then the defensive secondary. And so, yeah, it's tough that this team is losing a lot of players in the transfer portal. But at least for the most part, except for the defensive secondary, you're bringing in some key players. Recruiting-wise, not too bad. 40th in the country, 7th in the Pac-12. Got 3 4-stars coming in, and then 21 3-stars. There's potential on this team. I mean, the recruiting is not bad. I got this team at a 7 out of 10 on the future forecast meter. I mean, there's been some talk recently. Could Arizona be heading to the Big 12 sometime soon and leaving the Pac-12? That is very much a possibility, and that kind of puts a factor into the future forecast meter, I think. And I mean, if they do stick around with USC and UCLA taking off, I think suddenly Arizona, if this team can keep building on what they're doing, I'm expecting them to be good in 2022. This is a team, or in 2023, and I mean, you consider the future, this is a team that could be maybe a consistent contender in this conference. It's just a matter of whether or not this team can keep the ball rolling. But with that, let's take a look at this schedule now. This is a team that does play a difficult schedule, and I'll say this as well. I mean, the Pac-12 this season, this is the best that the Pac-12 has been in a very long time. I would consider the Pac-12 to be the 3rd best conference in college football over the Big 12 and the ACC for sure. The Big 12, it's close, but I mean, I think the Pac-12 has got so many contenders. I mean, the top is very close between 6 teams or so. I mean, in last season, it was a really good conference. It could be even better in 2023. I mean, so all that considered, this is going to be a challenge for Arizona this season. If it was any other typical year, I think Arizona could be right up there as a contender in the conference. But once again, this is the one year in, say, 10 years where the Pac-12 is a really solid conference. But looking at September here, Northern Arizona, take care of them, no problem. Mississippi State now on the road. Next season, I do think the Bulldogs fall off a bit. They could be a decent team still, and I still think that they beat Arizona just because, I mean, Mississippi State's offense is still pretty strong, and I think they get it done against this Arizona defense that I still think could definitely be an issue next season. This offense is going to be excellent. It's just the defense that might come back to bite again. UTEP, beat them no problem. Then Stanford on the road. I think this is a close game. Stanford hangs in there, keeps it to a close matchup, but I think you do beat Stanford there. So you're 3-1 heading into the Washington game, which Washington next season, your top 2 teams in the Pac-12, I think, are USC and Washington. You got to play them in back-to-back weeks. Both teams, I mean, there are a lot of really good offenses in the Pac-12 this season. Washington and USC, both of which, 2 of the best offenses in the country there. I do think you drop both games. I mean, this defense, I just don't think can handle either team. But the Washington State game, I do think you win that one. That's a beatable team, and I do think you get it done there. And then you got Oregon State at home after your bye. Even Oregon State, I mean, last season they exceeded some expectations, had a solid season, and they could still be pretty good. I've got them in that top tier for sure this season. So you're 4-4 heading into November. You got UCLA at home. I do think you beat them, so you get a nice win there, and then Colorado on the road. I do think Colorado is going to be terrible next year. There's just, in a competitive conference this season, and you consider, I mean, that is a team that is in, they could be good in the future. I do not think 2023 is the year, though. I think you beat them. And then Utah and Arizona State, I think both games are winnable, having Utah at home. Arizona State, a team that's kind of around Arizona's level, I think. But I do think you'd lose both matchups here. I mean, I've got this team at 6-6, and I think that this is an offense that is capable of being an 8 or 9 win team next season, maybe even better. I mean, that's within the possibility. It's just the defense that I really am uncertain about. I think it could be better than last season. You got a few transfers coming in that could definitely change the game, but the defensive secondary especially is going to be rough. I mean, when you're going up against any team that's got a really strong passing game, it's going to be really tough to beat them next season. I think if you're Arizona, and so that, I mean, Washington and USC especially are going to be brutal to beat. Utah, you could put them in there as well. I mean, otherwise, though, I do think this is a team that's got a lot of potential, and this is kind of one of those dark horse teams that I'm really interested to watch. I feel like there's a lot of potential here, and this is a team that I think is very much being overlooked. But I've got 6-6 for the prediction. The ceiling's 9-3. In the case that this defense gets it figured out, watch out, because Arizona could actually be a really good team. But 9-3 is still the ceiling considering the competitive conference. 4-8 is the floor. That's the worst possible record this team could have. I've got this team getting to a bowl game. It's a tough schedule, but I think you get up to 6 wins, and honestly 7 is very much within reason as well. But an interesting season coming up here for Arizona. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.